The Crossroads Diner never fully closed, but at 12:47 a.m. on a Thursday in February, it came close. The neon sign outside flickered with a tired persistence. Green light cast across the mostly empty parking lot. Inside, the fluorescent tubes hummed. Their endless mechanical song filled the space above booths that had seen decades of late-night confessions, breakups, quiet moments of reprieve. Marcus Turner sat in the back corner booth, his second cup of coffee growing cold in front of him. He'd been there for 90 minutes, 85 minutes longer than he'd initially planned, but the coffee was cheap. $3. The diner was warm. And for once, nobody needed anything from him. No one was asking him to fix something. No one was asking him to deliver something. No one needed him somewhere else in the next 4 hours. The silence felt like a luxury. He couldn't quite afford it, but he was stealing it anyway. Marcus Turner was 37 years old. Some days he felt older. His hands told the story. Calluses from handyman work, scars from the warehouse security job, the permanent stiffness in his right shoulder, shrapnel buried too deep to remove. Removing it would cause more damage than the metal itself. That shoulder had been aching all day. The weather was turning. The way it always did before a storm. His body announced weather changes the way other people checked their phones. Marcus worked 3 jobs. He'd been working 3 jobs for so long, sometimes he forgot what it felt like to have just one. He started his days at 5 a.m. medical supply deliveries across the city, transporting equipment and medications, keeping people connected to the resources they needed to stay alive. By noon, he moved to his second job, overnight security at the warehouse district. He sat in a climate-controlled booth from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. watching camera feeds, walking the perimeter, keeping an eye on inventory that belonged to people who would never know his name. On weekends, if his body cooperated, he picked up handyman jobs, fixing drywall, replacing fixtures, patching holes in walls. Other people's carelessness had created those holes. The math of survival was always the same. Rent was $1,200 a month. Utilities ran $300. His daughter Zara's school supplies, dance classes, the things that made her eyes light up. Those cost $400. Food, another $600. Everything else, if it happened, came out of a margin that barely existed. $2,500 minimum, every single month, just to keep their heads above water. In a city engineered for drowning, his wife Catherine had been the one who managed the beauty of it all. She'd handled the finances with something that looked like grace, made the phone calls, believed that things would eventually get better. She'd been wrong, but at least she'd believed it. Then cancer came, swift and unglamorous, the way his wife would have preferred, if she'd had her choice. 18 months of watching the strongest person he'd ever known become someone he couldn't save. She died 4 years ago. Marcus had fallen apart for a while after that. A bar fight, a holding cell overnight, months of numbness, a despair that had real texture and weight to it. Then one morning Zara had looked up at him from the kitchen table and asked a question that changed everything. "Daddy, who's going to make my lunch?" Something in him had snapped back into place. Not healed exactly, but functional. He'd done 2 years of PTSD treatment, regular sessions with a therapist who specialized in military trauma, coping mechanisms, breathing exercises, all the scaffolding that keeps a broken person standing. He'd rebuilt himself into something that worked, if not something whole. The night waitress came by and refilled his cup without being asked. Her name tag said Sophie, but Marcus had noticed things about her that suggested that might not be her real name. She was young, mid-20s probably, dark blonde hair pulled into a ponytail. The kind of precision that suggested someone who understood the importance of control. The way she moved suggested she'd been trained to move. Her posture had the careful geometry of private school corrections. The kind of alignment that came from years of being watched, evaluated, and yet she never complained, never checked her phone, never acted like the work was beneath her. He'd been coming to the crossroads for 3 months, just on his late-night breaks, long enough to notice patterns, the way she enunciated words a little too precisely, like they might break if she didn't handle them carefully, the way she observed the working people around her, truckers, nurses, the occasional insomniac, with something that looked like hunger, the way she never made eye contact with the businessmen who came in late, demanding, not because she was afraid, because she understood something about those men, about their relationship to the world. She'd chosen to remove herself from their equations. Marcus had learned a long time ago that everyone was fighting a war you couldn't see. Her war was just more carefully hidden than most. He looked at his watch. 38 minutes until his overnight security shift began. He had time. The coffee was still too hot to drink. Sophia Ashford's real name was Sophia Ashford, which was both completely accurate and entirely false. In her world, the world of quarterly earnings reports and board meetings and the careful calibration of power among people who'd been born into it, Sophia Ashford was worth knowing. She was the sole heir to Ashford Enterprises, a technology conglomerate valued at $52 billion and counting. Her father Richard had built it from a garage in Palo Alto into one of the most powerful tech companies on the planet. He'd been grooming her since birth to eventually control it. She could have been running a division, could have been sitting in corner offices, floor-to-ceiling windows, reviewing acquisition targets, sipping single-origin espresso, imported from places that existed primarily as tax havens. Instead, she was scraping dried ketchup off a booth seat at 1:15 in the morning, and she had never been more content. It wasn't a breakdown, no matter what her father's people whispered in the hallways of Ashford Tower. It was a choice, a calculated choice, a negotiated choice, a fiercely defended choice. It had taken 3 hours of conversation with her father, the threat of genuine departure, before he'd reluctantly agreed to it. 6 months, that's what he'd said. You can have your experiment for 6 months. She'd taken him at his word, dyed her hair darker, adopted the name Sophie, found a job at a diner that had never made the pages of any food blog. The Crossroads Diner wasn't a destination, it was a place where people who had nowhere else to be came, at odd hours of the night, to sit with their thoughts, their coffee, the small kindnesses of strangers. 3 months in, and Sophia had learned more about the actual experience of work than she'd learned in 2 years of graduate school. She understood the cumulative exhaustion of standing for 8 hours straight. She understood how a customer's small cruelty accumulated in your body like a stone. A raised voice, a dismissal, a demand made without pleas. She understood that people who worked with their hands, or their feet, or their ability to be pleasant while being disrespected, understood something about dignity that her Ivy League education had never quite managed to teach her. She'd also learned what it felt like to be invisible. In her previous life, people saw Sophia Ashford, CEO heir, the woman whose name opened doors, commanded attention. Here at the crossroads, she was just Sophie the waitress. Men spoke through her to get their food. Women barely noticed her at all. The cook in the back referred to her as that quiet blonde. It was the freest she'd ever felt. And then there was the man in the corner booth. She had noticed him immediately. The way you notice someone who's learning how to be invisible, in a room where everyone else is already there. He was black, mid-30s, with the kind of stillness that came from military training. His eyes had that particular quality of awareness, the kind that notices things, but doesn't comment on them. That watches without judgment. He came in once, then twice, then consistently. Always on Thursday nights, always for 90 minutes, always with coffee he didn't really drink. She'd noticed the way he looked at his watch. calculating time the way a person does. When every minute has a cost, she'd noticed the shrapnel scar tissue on his shoulder, visible where his flannel shirt didn't quite cover it. She'd noticed that he never looked at her with want or expectation, just a kind of gentle observation, the way you might watch someone you're trying not to disturb. Tonight, as she refilled his coffee, their eyes had met for just a moment. She'd seen something in his expression, recognition of another person who was fighting a war he couldn't see. It was a look she'd never received before. It felt dangerous in a way she couldn't quite define. She had no idea that her calculated sabbatical from power was about to collide with someone who'd never had any power at all. The door of the crossroads opened at 1:47 a.m. The air in the diner shifted, in the way it always did, when someone was used to occupying space, rather than moving through it. Brandon Carver was 42 years old, venture capitalist. The kind of man who'd learned early. That money wasn't just a tool, it was a language. If you spoke it fluently enough, the whole world became a place where you were always right. His suit cost more than Marcus made in a month. His watch cost more than Marcus made in a year. He moved through space like he owned it, because in most spaces he functionally did. He was also drunk. Not the sloppy kind. Not the kind where logic dissolved completely. This was worse. This was the dangerous kind of drunk. The kind where the alcohol burned away the last thin layer of civility. That men like Brandon wore in public, leaving nothing but the raw entitlement underneath. He'd been at a private dinner with investors. 3 bottles of wine shared among 4 men, followed by whiskeys at a lounge. That catered to people who'd never been told no in their entire lives. His 2 associates, Dale and Kyle, had tried to steer him toward a car home. Brandon had insisted on coffee first. They'd given up trying to manage him. He dropped into a booth with the boneless confidence of someone who'd never experienced actual consequences. "Table for 3, he announced, despite the fact that he was already seated. "And make sure it's fresh. Last time I was somewhere like this, they served me something that tasted like it was brewed during the Clinton administration." His associates exchanged the kind of look that people who work for difficult men learn to exchange without moving their faces. Sophia approached with her order pad. "Good evening, what can I get for you?" Brandon didn't look at her, not really. He looked through her, the way wealthy men often did, with service workers. "Coffee black, and don't waste my time with conversation." She turned to go. That was when his hand shot out. The grip was sudden and hard, the kind that left marks. The order pad clattered to the floor. Sophia's eyes went wide. A flash of genuine shock, a flash of fear, that she couldn't quite hide, behind her practiced composure. But what Brandon didn't expect was what came next. Instead of pulling away, instead of calling for help, she went very still. She didn't panic, she didn't lose her voice. "Let go of me," she said, not a plea, an instruction. The kind of instruction a person gives when they're used to being obeyed. Brandon smiled, actually smiled. Like this was foreplay. Like a woman's resistance was just part of the game. He pulled her closer, his thumb pressing into the inside of her wrist. "Come on, sweetheart. Don't be like that. Pretty girl like you working a dump like this. You must be dying for some real conversation. Sit down, have a drink with us." "I'm working," Sophia said. Her voice was steady, but Marcus, watching from his booth, could hear the thin edge of strain underneath it. "Please let go." That was the second time she'd asked. Brandon's grip tightened, as if he hadn't heard her at all, as if her words were just background noise he could ignore. "Let go of me," she said again, harder this time, louder. There was a quality to her voice now, the exact quality that comes right before someone decides they're done being polite. The diner had gone quiet. The trucker in the corner booth turned a page of his newspaper. With exaggerated focus, the elderly couple near the window began gathering their coats. The cook in the back turned up the radio. A classic rock song filled the silence, like a bandage over a wound. This was how it always worked. Money talked, power grabbed. Everyone else found somewhere else to look. Marcus set his coffee cup down. The ceramic made a small, precise sound against the saucer. He stood. The movement was slow and deliberate. The way he used to move. When approaching an unfamiliar checkpoint, non-threatening on the surface, absolutely certain underneath. He covered the distance between his booth and Brandon's table in 4 unhurried steps, his boots barely making a sound on the cracked linoleum. "That's enough," Marcus said. His voice was quiet. The kind of quiet that made both of Brandon's associates shift in their seats. Brandon looked up. His eyes traveled over Marcus with the practiced assessment of a man who categorized people by net worth. Worn jeans, faded flannel, calloused hands, working boots with the soles starting to separate on the left one. In Brandon's mental spreadsheet, Marcus Blackwood didn't even register as a line item. "Mind your own business, pal," Brandon said. "This doesn't concern you." "That's where you're wrong," Marcus replied, his gaze fixed on the place where Brandon's fingers pressed into Sophia's skin. "She asked you 3 times to let go. When a man puts his hands on a woman who doesn't want it, it stops being a private matter. It becomes everyone's concern." He paused, letting the silence do some work. "I'm asking you once politely. Let her go." The diner held its breath. The refrigerator hummed. Rain hammered the windows. The radio played on. Some guitar solo that nobody was listening to. Sophia looked at Marcus, and something complicated moved across her face. Surprise, gratitude, and something deeper than both. A kind of recognition, as if she were seeing proof of something she'd been told didn't exist anymore. In her world, people didn't intervene. They calculated. They weighed exposure against advantage, risk against reward. They hired people to handle things. They absolutely did not stand up in a diner at 1 a.m. and put themselves between a powerful man and a stranger, simply because it was right. Brandon's face darkened. The alcohol burned away whatever thin calculation might have told him to back down. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he said. "I could buy and sell you 100 times. I could make one call and you'd never work in the city again. You'd lose your apartment, your car, whatever sad little life you've stitched together. Don't test me." "I know exactly what you are," Marcus said, and now there was an edge in his voice, quiet as a knife being drawn from a sheath. "You're a man who thinks his bank account makes him untouchable. But right here, right now in this diner, your money doesn't mean a thing. You're going to let go of her wrist. You're going to apologize. And then you're going to leave." He paused. "Or we're going to have a different kind of conversation. Your choice." Derek made 2 mistakes in that moment. The first was looking at Marcus Blackwood's worn clothes and seeing weakness. The second was nodding at Dale. Dale started to rise, reaching for Marcus's shoulder with one meaty hand, the kind of gesture that was meant to move a problem out of the way. The movement that followed was so fast and so clean. Most people in the diner later said they weren't sure what they'd seen. Marcus pivoted on his left foot, his right hand came up, trapped Dale's reaching arm at the wrist and elbow. A twist, a controlled step, and Dale was face down on the table, his arm locked behind him, in a hold that promised serious damage if he moved. The whole thing took less than 2 seconds, no wasted motion, no violence beyond what was necessary. Textbook. Kyle had half risen from his seat. Marcus pointed at him with his free hand. A single gesture, index finger extended. Calm as pointing out a street sign. Kyle sat back down. "Nobody needs to get hurt," Marcus said, his voice still at conversational level. "Your friend's fine. Shoulder might be sore in the morning. Nothing's broken yet." He looked at Brandon. "Let her go." Brandon released Sophia's wrist. She stepped back, cradling it against her chest, red marks already blooming on her skin. Marcus held the lock for 1 more second, then released Dale, who stumbled backward, cursing, clutching his shoulder. Marcus returned to his booth, picked up his coffee, took a sip, as if nothing had happened. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Brandon snarled, yanking out his phone. "I'm calling the cops. Assault and battery. You're going to jail and I'm going to make sure you rot there." "Go ahead," Marcus said. "Everyone here saw you grab her first. That's assault. What I did was defensive intervention on behalf of another person. Any officer worth his badge knows the difference." The police arrived 11 minutes later. Lieutenant Catherine Hayes, a 20-year veteran of the force, who'd seen every kind of trouble this city had to offer, took statements from everyone present. She knew Marcus by reputation, the Marine who worked 3 jobs, never caused problems, always had his daughter at school on time, the kind of man who'd rebuilt himself into something functional, after the kind of loss that breaks most people. The security camera footage was a problem though. The angle was wrong. The diner's old neon sign cast a pulsing glare across the frame. That washed out the crucial first seconds of the confrontation, the moment Brandon had grabbed Sophia. Sophia's statement was clear. 2 other customers reluctantly confirmed that Brandon had initiated physical contact. "Looks like self-defense to me," Hayes said, closing her notebook. But Brandon was insisting on pressing charges. The prosecutor would have to make a decision based on the available evidence. For now, Hayes needed Marcus to come to the station and give a formal statement. Marcus nodded. He asked to make a call first. His neighbor, Mrs. Ortega, had watched Zara while he was at the diner. The little girl answered on the 3rd ring, her voice small and sleep fuzzy. "Daddy, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Might be late getting home. Mrs. Ortega will make you breakfast." He paused. Be good for her. Another pause. Then the question that would haunt him. "Did you help someone Daddy like when you were a Marine?" Marcus closed his eyes, pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the diner window. "Something like that, baby. Go back to sleep." At the station, Brandon was already there, with a lawyer who'd materialized like a bad omen, an immaculate man in a charcoal suit, who spoke in a low-clipped voice about liability, damages, teaching certain people their place. But help arrived from an unexpected direction. Andrea Santos, 34, walked into the station at 2:30 in the morning. The kind of attorney who'd clawed her way through law school, on scholarships, while raising 2 kids alone. "I'm Mr. Blackwood's attorney," she announced. A customer at the diner had called her, someone who knew she did pro bono work. For veterans, it was the thing she was most proud of, and it paid nothing. But she would fight anyone who tried to take it from her. Brandon's lawyer sized her up, saw the off-the-rack blazer, the scuffed briefcase, and made the same mistake Brandon had made with Marcus. He underestimated her. "My client was acting in defense of a third party who was being physically assaulted," Andrea said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Unless your client wants his blood alcohol level from tonight entered into the record, alongside the testimony of multiple witnesses, I'd suggest we all take a breath." The charges were held pending investigation. Marcus was released. He went straight to his security shift, 3 hours late, and worked until dawn, the weight of what might come settling into his shoulders like a stone. The next morning, Marcus woke to his phone vibrating, like something alive. Someone had posted a video online, shot on a phone from an angle that captured only the moment Marcus restrained Dale. No context, no lead-up, no audio of Sophia asking Brandon to stop. The caption read, "Violent veteran attacks businessman in unprovoked diner assault." It spread like fire through dry brush. Local news picked it up. Comment sections erupted. By noon, the security company that employed Marcus for overnight shifts called to let him go. Liability concerns, the manager said, unable to meet his eyes. By evening, his delivery route supervisor suggested he take some time off until this blows over. The property management company he did handyman work for suddenly had no available jobs. In 48 hours, Marcus Blackwood went from 3 jobs to 0. The financial math changed overnight. He'd had roughly 6 weeks of savings. After that, the numbers stopped making sense. Rent would be due in 12 days. The electric bill was already past due. He'd already paid Zara's dance class tuition. Thank God for that small grace. But there would be other costs. There were always other costs when you were a parent. Parents at Zara's school whispered when he showed up. For pickup. One mother pulled her daughter away from Zara. On the playground, Zara came home confused, asking why her friend wasn't allowed to play with her anymore. Marcus sat at the kitchen table that night, after putting Zara to bed, staring at the stack of bills he'd organized. By due date, rent in 12 days, electric bill past due, dance class tuition he'd already paid. Thank God, he could make it maybe 6 weeks on savings. After that, the math stopped working. He didn't shake. His hands were steady on the table. The PTSD treatment had been working for 2 years. He wasn't the broken man who'd thrown a punch in a bar. After Catherine died, he was a father who'd done the right thing and was being punished for it. But he sat alone at that table for 3 hours, staring at a stack of bills, doing the calculation of his own failure. His daughter asked for nothing, asked only to be loved, and he was about to not be able to give her even that. The media campaign escalated beyond his worst imaginings. Derek's old bar fight photo from 6 years ago, 3 months after Catherine's funeral, when grief had weight and texture and took the shape of his own fists, surfaced without context. Articles discussed his unstable veteran background, mental health concerns, questions about whether people with PTSD should be allowed to work in public spaces. The narrative was building. Violent man, dangerous instincts, disabled by trauma. Derek filed a civil suit for assault, demanding damages that exceeded what Marcus would earn in a decade. His lawyer's letter arrived with the weight of consequence, $50,000, as a settlement offer and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. That would require Marcus to never speak about the incident, never publicly defend himself, never discuss Derek Sloan in any context. $50,000. Enough to cover rent for 2 years, enough to keep Zara in her school, in her dance classes, in the life that made her eyes light up. But it would mean signing a document that said he'd done something wrong. The photographs of Zara appeared on social media 3 days after the settlement offer arrived. Shot with a telephoto lens from across the street. Zara at school, Zara at her dance recital, Zara on the playground. The message required no caption. It was perfectly clear. I know where your daughter is. I own your reputation, and I can reach your child. Choose wisely. That night, Marcus held his daughter while she slept, and understood for the first time the full weight of what it meant to lose everything. Brandon Carver didn't know what the waitress's real name was, not at first, not until his hangover cleared, and the photos from the police report crossed his desk. His assistant, a nervous young woman named Jennifer, brought him a file. Urgent, written across the top in red pen. His face went pale. The woman he'd grabbed, the woman he'd thought was just another service worker he could disrespect, without consequence. Elena Mercer, Richard Mercer's daughter, the sole heir to Ashford Enterprises. The panic lasted about 10 seconds. Then the calculation kicked in. Derek Sloan had not built a $200 million venture fund by panicking. He'd built it by controlling narratives. And right now, the narrative needed to be very, very simple. The veteran was unstable. The situation was a misunderstanding, and anyone who said otherwise needed to be silenced. He called his media contacts first. The edited video was already doing its work. But Derek fed it rocket fuel, background information on Marcus's PTSD diagnosis, the 6-year-old photo from the bar fight, After Catherine's death, no context, just the image of a man being restrained by police, captioned in a way that implied a pattern of violence. He called his lawyers second. A civil suit, assault, defamation, emotional distress, demanding damages that would bankrupt a man who barely had $2,000 in savings. And then he made a quieter call to a private intelligence firm that specialized in personal security assessments, which was a polished way of saying they watched people and documented their vulnerabilities. Within 24 hours, photographs of Zara appeared on social media. The message was clear. Without needing words, I own your family. Sophia found out about the video from Vivian Cross, her father's head of strategic communications. Vivian, 31, had built her career on making problems disappear. She was brilliant, ruthless when necessary. She sat across from Sophia in an Ashford Technologies conference room with a tablet in one hand and an expression that said, "This was going to be a long conversation." "The man who helped you is being destroyed," Vivian said. "Derek Sloan is using every tool he has, media, legal, surveillance." The veteran lost all 3 of his jobs. There are photographs of his daughter being circulated online, and the narrative in the press is that he's an unstable, violent man who attacked a respected investor. Sophia felt something ignite in her chest. Not the cool strategic anger she'd learned in boardrooms, something raw, something that tasted like the greasy coffee at the crossroads and smelled like rain on linoleum. "He saved me," Sophia said. "He stood up when everyone else looked away, and now they're destroying his life for it." "Yes," Vivian said. "That's exactly what's happening. The question is what you're going to do about it." "I tried. I found him a lawyer already." She had, the night of the incident, before the video went viral. Sophia had tracked down Andrea Santos through a veterans legal aid network and arranged anonymously for Andrea to represent Marcus. But Derek's legal and media machinery was a steamroller, and Andrea, brilliant as she was one woman, with a cluttered office and a caseload that didn't pay. "A lawyer isn't enough," Vivian said. "Sloan is fighting on 5 fronts simultaneously: legal, media, financial, personal intimidation, and business leverage. He's positioning himself to lock in the Ashford Cloud infrastructure contract. At the quarterly board meeting, he thinks if he controls that leverage, your father will pressure you to stay quiet." The conference room door opened, and Richard Mercer walked in. At 63, Richard moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing and who had never in 40 years of business encountered a problem that couldn't be solved through sufficient application of intelligence, capital, and will. He looked at his daughter with eyes that held equal parts concern and frustration. "Enough," he said. "This experiment is over. You're coming home. Gavin will handle your security from now on." Gavin Cross, 34, appeared in the doorway behind Richard. Former Army Special Forces, private security for 7 years, he had the kind of physical presence that made crowded rooms feel less crowded. He was also Vivian's older brother, though they shared almost nothing in common, except a talent for solving problems and an unwillingness to discuss their childhood. "No," Sophia said. Richard blinked. He was not a man accustomed to hearing that word. "I'm not running," Sophia continued, "and I'm not letting them destroy Marcus Blackwood for protecting me. He didn't know who I was. He didn't help me because I'm your daughter. He helped me because I was a person who needed help. When is the last time anyone in our world did something simply because it was right?" "He's a stranger, Sophia. 3 jobs, barely making rent. How do you know he didn't?" "He's a Marine veteran who held his dying wife's hand for 18 months and has never missed a parent-teacher conference while working himself to death to give his daughter a good life. Gavin can confirm that, because I know you've already had him investigated." She looked at Gavin directly. Gavin very slightly nodded. Richard Mercer sat down. "So what do you propose?" "I propose we fight back," Sophia said. "But not your way. Not with money, with the truth. The edited video passed 500,000 views. Local news ran segments with titles like "Diner Altercation Raises Questions About Veteran Mental Health Resources," which sounded compassionate and was actually devastating. Marcus's PTSD diagnosis was discussed by talking heads who'd never served a day in uniform. The bar fight photo from 6 years ago was presented without the context that he'd been 3 months past his wife's funeral. Deep in a grief he hadn't yet learned to navigate, Andrea filed motions and gathered evidence, but the legal system moved at the speed of bureaucracy, while Derek's media campaign moved at the speed of the internet. Derek's attorney sent a formal settlement offer, $50,000, and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The NDA would cover the events at the diner, any statements about Derek Sloan, and buried in the fine print, any future claims by any party related to the incident. $50,000. Enough to cover rent for 2 years, enough to keep Zara in her school, in her dance classes, in the life that made her eyes light up, enough to start a college fund, enough to breathe for just a little while. Marcus looked at the documents for exactly 3 seconds, then he tore them in half. "Tell Derek Sloan," he said to Andrea, his voice flat and final, "that he can take his money and his NDA and choke on them." Andrea gathered the pieces. "You know what this means. They're going to escalate. They're already photographing your daughter. How much more can they escalate?" "How much more can they?" Marcus replied quietly. "You'd be surprised." Andrea paused. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. I will fight this with everything I have, but I'm one lawyer with a practice that runs on coffee and spite. They have a machine." "Then we better be tougher than the machine," Marcus said. Andrea looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with Zara climbing into his lap. "Are you going to do it, Daddy?" she asked. And there was a wisdom in her small voice that broke his heart. "Do what, baby? Take a job that helps people, like you did in the diner." Marcus held his daughter. She was right, in the way children are right, cutting through adult complications to the simple truth beneath. He was struggling with his pride, his need to feel like he'd earned his own way, not been saved. But Zara hadn't asked for a proud father. She'd asked for a present one. He set the folder down. Inside was information about a new initiative, Safe Workplace, a program designed to train security personnel and organizational leaders in de-escalation, intervention, and the creation of cultures where people looked out for each other instead of away. Sophia Ashford was launching it. Andrea Santos had been making calls, pulling threads, doing the unglamorous investigative work that would make anyone's highlight reel. She found Rachel Morrison, 29, who'd worked as a bartender at an upscale hotel where Derek was a regular. Rachel had her own story, hands where they shouldn't have been, propositions that crossed every line, text messages sent after she'd rejected him. That would curdle your stomach. She'd quit the job, but the messages kept coming. Derek had a way of not accepting rejection. 2 other women came forward privately, willing to provide sworn statements, but terrified of going public. "We have a pattern of behavior," Andrea said, spreading documents across her cluttered desk. 3 women, consistent accounts, corroborating evidence. But patterns prove character, not the specific events of that night. We still need hard proof of what happened at the diner. The security camera footage is useless. That's when Sophia said something that changed everything. "I have audio," she said quietly. She'd been wearing a prototype. The night at the diner. A small device clipped to her apron. A Mercer Technologies prototype called the Vox. A wearable audio recorder designed for workplace safety documentation. It was part of a project she'd been developing on her own time, inspired by exactly the kind of situations she'd been observing during her months working at the Crossroads. The device recorded continuous audio. In a 48-hour loop, it had captured everything. Every word Derek said, every time Sophia asked him to stop, the sound of Marcus's calm voice intervening, the scuffle, all of it, in pristine, unedited, time-stamped audio. This changes everything, Andrea said. Listening to the playback, with her eyes closed. This isn't just evidence for the criminal case. This is evidence of premeditated defamation. They edited the video to remove context that they knew existed. That's not spin, that's fraud. Marcus and Sophia met privately. During the investigation, she came to Andrea's office herself, not as the Ashford heir, but as a witness and a client. The moment they were alone, the air between them became something else entirely, not quite tension, but the beginning of something. That required honesty. I owe you an apology, Sophia said. I should have told you who I was that first night. I should have used my resources immediately. Instead, I tried to handle it anonymously through channels the way I was raised to handle everything. And while I was handling it my way, you were suffering. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. That's on Derek Sloan. What's on you is the audio recording that took him down and the lawyer who showed up at 2 in the morning. That was you, wasn't it? Sophia didn't deny it. I didn't stand up in that diner because of who you are, Marcus said. I stood up because you needed help, that's all. And I'd do it again tomorrow, for you or for anyone. If you'd known who I was, Sophia asked, would you still have been a person who needed help? Or would you have been the CEO's daughter? The question hung between them, the exact question that defined the distance between them. I don't know, Sophia said finally. I'm glad I don't have to wonder. Marcus nodded. Something in his shoulders eased slightly. Not trust exactly, but the beginning of it. When you sent the lawyer, when you gathered evidence, when you fought back, Marcus asked carefully, was that because you felt responsible, or was that something else? The question was delicate. He was asking, are you doing this out of guilt or out of something I don't want to name? Both, Sophia said. I was responsible. You were suffering because of something that happened to me, but... She paused. It stopped being just about responsibility. Somewhere around the diner, somewhere around the 3rd or 4th time I replayed that audio and listened to your voice. Marcus stepped closer. He could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight of what she was fighting against. What did you hear? He asked. Someone who didn't know who I was. Didn't care about my money or my company or my name. Just saw someone who needed help and didn't hesitate. She looked at him directly. That's not something I've ever experienced before. That kind of clarity. That kind of choice made without calculation. While Sophia and Marcus were learning to work together, Gavin Cross was conducting his own investigation. Originally, Richard Mercer had ordered him to find dirt on Marcus, something that would prove the veteran was an opportunist, a con artist, someone angling for a payday. What Gavin found instead was a man who visited his wife's grave every Sunday, a man who'd written a letter to the family of every soldier he had lost, letters that were still being answered years later, a man who'd never missed a single one of Zara's dance recitals, even when it meant driving across the city, between shifts, with no sleep. Gavin sat across from Richard, in the billionaire's home study, a room that cost more to furnish than Marcus would earn in 5 years. Your daughter is right about him, Gavin said. Everyone has a price, Richard replied, not looking up from his screens. Not this one. Sloan offered him $50,000 to sign an NDA. Blackwood tore it up. Sloan's people are photographing his 7-year-old daughter to intimidate him. He hasn't flinched. Gavin paused. Sir, when is the last time you met someone who couldn't be bought? Richard Mercer looked up. The question landed somewhere deep, in a place he'd buried under 4 decades of deals and acquisitions and the unshakable belief that everyone had a price. What do you recommend? He asked. Don't buy him, Gavin said. Don't rescue him. Give him a platform to tell the truth and let the truth do the rest. while Andrea continued building the legal case and Sophia prepared the media strategy, Marcus found himself teaching. He began working with the community center, leading de-escalation workshops for security personnel and interested community members. It wasn't a paying job, not yet, but it gave him purpose, and more importantly, it gave him a chance to understand his own experience through the lens of teaching it. He taught people about the psychology of intervention, about the specific moment when a situation could tip one way or another, based on how someone spoke, how they stood, what they communicated, through their body, before they ever used words. The hardest part isn't the confrontation, he told a group of young security officers one evening. The hardest part is overcoming the voice in your head, the voice that says it's not your problem, mind your own business, someone else will handle it. He paused. But when someone is hurt and you have the power to stop it, it is your problem, it is your business, it's everyone's business. Sophia watched him teach. One evening, standing at the back of the room, she saw something in the way he moved through the space, the way he treated even the most reluctant students with respect. He wasn't just teaching a skill, he was teaching people permission. Permission to care, permission to act, permission to be the person who didn't look away. Vivian Cross was preparing the narrative for release. She'd spent her entire career making problems disappear, but this time she was going to do the opposite. She was going to make a problem visible. Rachel Keane had agreed to go on record. She'd decided finally that she was tired of being afraid. She would tell her story, put her name on it, and let Derek Sloan understand that she was done hiding. Andrea filed the final motions. The evidence was airtight, the audio recording, the witness statements, the pattern of behavior documented across multiple years and multiple victims. All they needed was a place to deliver it. The Ashford Technologies quarterly board meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. It was not the product launch gala, not the splashy public event where investors mingled with journalists over champagne. It was the closed-door session where real decisions were made, where contracts were signed or killed, where men like Derek Sloan exercised the leverage they'd spent years accumulating. Derek arrived confident. The civil suit against Marcus was grinding forward. The media narrative was holding. The veteran was broke, unemployed, and one bad month away from losing his apartment. Everything was proceeding according to plan. He seated himself near the head of the table, flanked by his attorneys, a man who'd never truly faced consequence in his adult life. Richard Mercer called the meeting to order. "Before we address the quarterly agenda," Richard said, "there's a matter of board integrity I need to raise." Derek's smile didn't waver. "Of course, Richard. What's on your mind?" 3 weeks ago, one of our board investors physically assaulted my daughter in a public establishment. When a bystander intervened to protect her, that investor launched a coordinated campaign of media manipulation, legal intimidation, and personal surveillance, including photographing a 7-year-old child to destroy the bystander's life and silence witnesses. The smile disappeared. Richard pressed a button on the conference table's control panel. Audio filled the room. Sophia's voice asking Derek to let go. Once, twice, 3 times, Derek's slurred aggressive responses, then Marcus's voice, calm and measured, giving Derek every opportunity to stop, the scuffle, Dale hitting the table, and then Derek's threat, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The recording played for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Nobody in the room breathed. "This audio was captured by a Mercer Technologies prototype device," Richard said, "and has been authenticated by independent forensic analysts. It is accompanied by a sworn eyewitness statement from a former military police officer who was present and by the testimony of 3 additional women who have experienced similar behavior from Mr. Sloan over the past 4 years." He turned to Derek directly. His eyes were ice. "Your investment stake in Mercer Technologies is being liquidated effective immediately. Your access to all proprietary systems, data, and facilities is revoked. The cloud infrastructure contract your fund holds is terminated for cause, specifically breach of our corporate conduct standards. Our legal team has forwarded the audio recording, witness statements, and evidence of your intimidation campaign to the district attorney's office, which has indicated it intends to pursue criminal charges. Derek's lead attorney leaned forward. Richard, let's not be hasty. I'm sure we can... We're past that, Richard said. The door to the conference room opened. Lieutenant Catherine Hayes entered with 2 officers. Her face was neutral, professional, the face of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. Derek Sloan, Hayes said, her voice cutting through the mahogany and leather silence of the boardroom. You're under arrest for assault, criminal harassment, witness intimidation, and stalking. Please stand up. Derek didn't move. For the first time in his adult life, his money had nothing to say. Hayes waited 3 seconds, then she walked around the table. Derek Sloan, venture capitalist, power broker, man who had never been told no, was handcuffed in front of the people whose respect he'd spent his career cultivating. The story broke that afternoon. Not as Derek had scripted it, but as it actually happened. Andrea held a press conference outside the courthouse, flanked by Rachel Keane, who had decided she was done being afraid. The audio recording was released to media outlets. Within 72 hours, 4 more women came forward with accounts of Derek's behavior. His investment firm began hemorrhaging clients. Federal investigators opened inquiries into several of his fund's more opaque transactions. The edited video of Marcus was re-examined and recontextualized by every outlet that had run it. Retractions were published, apologies were issued, though they felt thin compared to the damage done. Derek Sloan's civil suit against Marcus was dropped. His attorneys suddenly had bigger problems to manage. Marcus watched the news coverage from his apartment. Zara curled against his side on the couch, her small hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers. Andrea called that evening. The civil suit is dead. Criminal charges are moving forward against Sloan, not you. And Marcus, I've gotten 3 calls today from companies wanting to hire you. Your name is cleared. Marcus thanked her. He sat in the quiet of his apartment after Zara went to bed, looking at the folded flag on the mantel, the photos of Catherine, the crayon drawings that covered every surface Zara could reach. And he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory, not relief. Something closer to the feeling of setting down a weight he'd been carrying for so long. He'd forgotten what his shoulders felt like without it. The knock came the next evening. Marcus opened the door and found Sophia standing in the hallway. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. No makeup, her hair back in the same ponytail she wore at the diner. She held a foil-covered baking dish. I made lasagna, she said. I should warn you, it's the first one I've ever made. My old housekeeper tried to teach me over a video call. It might be terrible. Marcus stepped aside. Come in. She entered the small apartment, took in the military precision of the organization, the flag, the photos, the evidence of a life maintained. Through sheer discipline, she set the lasagna on the counter, next to the stack of bills arranged by due date, and the 3-job schedule, still taped to the refrigerator, 2 of the 3 jobs crossed out. I owe you an apology, Sophia said. I should have told you who I was that first night. I should have used my resources immediately. Instead, I tried to handle it anonymously through channels the way I was raised to handle everything. By the time I realized that wasn't enough, you'd already lost your jobs. Your daughter was frightened. That's on me. No, Marcus said. That's on Derek Sloan. What's on you is the audio recording that took him down and the lawyer who showed up at 2 in the morning. That was you, wasn't it? Sophia didn't deny it. I didn't stand up in that diner because of who you are, Marcus said. I stood up because you needed help, that's all, and I'd do it again tomorrow, for you or for anyone. Sophia nodded. But there was something in her face. Disappointment, longing. That suggested she wanted him to have stood up for something more than principle. The moment hung between them, heavy with possibility. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said quietly. "Anything. When you sent the lawyer, when you gathered evidence, when you fought back, was that because you felt responsible, or was that something else?" The question was direct, and Sophia understood what he was really asking. "Are you doing this out of guilt or out of something I don't want to name?" "Both," she said finally. "I was responsible. You were suffering because of something that happened to me. But," she paused, "it stopped being just responsibility somewhere around the diner, somewhere around the third or fourth time I replayed that audio and listened to your voice." Marcus stepped closer. "What did you hear?" "Someone who didn't know who I was. Didn't care about my money or my company or my name. Just saw someone who needed help and didn't hesitate." She looked at him directly. "That's not something I've ever experienced before. That kind of clarity, that kind of choice made without calculation." Lily appeared in the doorway of her room, holding a crayon drawing. She'd drawn a figure in a blue shirt with a cape, standing between a smaller figure and a menacing one. "Is that Daddy?" Sophia asked, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "It's anyone who helps," Lily said, with the devastating clarity of a 7-year-old. "Daddy says everyone can be that person. You just have to choose." Sophia looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she looked at Marcus, then at Zara, and in that moment, she chose. 2 weeks later, Richard Mercer asked Marcus to come to his office, not the corporate headquarters, but his private study, the room where real conversations happened. Gavin was there, so was Sophia. "Mr. Blackwood," Richard said, "I owe you an apology. I assumed you were an opportunist. I had you investigated. I was wrong, and I'm not a man who says that often." "You don't owe me anything," Marcus said. "I did what anyone should have done." "That's precisely the point," Richard replied. "Anyone should have. Only you did." He slid a folder across the desk. "This isn't charity, it's a job offer. Sophia's launching a new division, the Safe Workplace Initiative. It's a comprehensive program for harassment prevention, crisis intervention, training, and workplace safety systems. We're going to offer it to every company in our network and eventually to any organization that wants it." Sophia leaned forward slightly. "We need someone to lead the security and training program, someone who understands de-escalation under pressure, someone who's been trained in defensive intervention and can teach others, someone who can walk into a room full of corporate managers and show them what real courage looks like." She paused. "Someone who does the right thing when no one's watching and also when everyone is." Marcus opened the folder. The position paid $90,000 a year. Full benefits. Flexible hours built around a parent's schedule. It was real work, meaningful work, and it was being offered, not as a reward for saving the boss's daughter, but because his specific skills, the skills of a Marine trained in crisis response, a man who'd learned to manage his own demons through discipline and treatment, were exactly what the program needed. "Can I think about it?" Marcus asked. "Of course," Richard said. He stood, extended his hand, and Marcus shook it. "For what it's worth, Mr. Blackwood, I'd be proud to have you as part of this, not as a favor, as a colleague." After they left, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, with the folder open in front of him. Zara climbed into his lap. "Are you going to do it?" she asked. "What do you think?" "I think you should do what makes you happy." She thought about it. "And helping people makes you happy." Marcus looked at the drawing on the refrigerator, the figure with the cape, and realized his daughter had understood something fundamental about the world. That took most adults a lifetime to learn. "Yes," he said, "it does." He called Richard the next morning. He would take the position, but on one condition: no pity employment if he wasn't delivering value. He could be fired. Richard agreed, and for the first time, Marcus Blackwood accepted help without it feeling like defeat. The Safe Workplace Initiative launched, with Sophia as director, and Marcus as head of security and intervention training. Andrea Vasquez became legal counsel. Gavin designed the physical security protocols. Vivian Cross channeled her media expertise into awareness campaigns. The first training session was held at the Crossroads Diner, the place where everything had started. Marcus stood before a room of managers, HR professionals, security officers, workers from a dozen companies. He taught them not just how to intervene physically, but how to overcome the psychological paralysis that kept people frozen when they witnessed injustice. The hardest part isn't the confrontation, he told them. The hardest part is overcoming the voice in your head, the voice that says, "It's not your problem, mind your own business, someone else will handle it." He paused. But when someone is being hurt and you have the power to stop it, it is your problem, it is your business, it's everyone's business. In the audience, Rachel Keane sat with the other women who'd come forward. They weren't victims anymore, they were advocates, sharing their stories, so others could recognize the warning signs and find the courage to act. Marcus Webb, the truck driver, who'd finally decided that silence was its own kind of failure, was there too. He'd brought his daughter. Derek Sloan's trial was a landmark. The audio evidence was irrefutable. The pattern of behavior, documented across multiple victims and years, painted a picture that no amount of legal maneuvering could erase. He was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, plus substantial restitution to his victims. His fund collapsed. His name became shorthand for the consequences of believing that wealth placed you above accountability. More importantly, his case became the Safe Workplace Initiative's most powerful teaching tool, not as a story of punishment, but as a story of what happens when good people stop looking away. 6 months after the night at the Crossroads, Marcus and Sophia stood in a park. On a Sunday afternoon, Zara was learning to ride her bike. Without training wheels, she'd been at it for weeks. Today was the first day. She might actually make it all the way around the path without falling. "She asked me something yesterday," Sophia said, holding a thermos of coffee, "that was significantly better than anything the Crossroads served." "Yeah?" "She asked if standing up for people runs in families." Marcus smiled. "What did you tell her?" Sophia took his hand. Not romantically, just the simple grip of someone who'd chosen to stay. "I told her it does now." Zara wobbled, overcorrected, wobbled again, but she kept pedaling. Sophia squeezed Marcus's hand, not in fear, in hope. This was what she'd left the boardroom to find, not adventure or authenticity or whatever she told herself. She was looking for this. The quiet Sunday afternoon, the child learning balance, the man beside her, who understood. That strength meant knowing when not to move. Zara completed her first full lap of the park path. She threw both arms in the air, the bike swerving wildly, and let out a scream of pure triumph. Marcus and Sophia cheered after they left the park, walking slowly to the car, Zara between them, holding both their hands. Marcus thought about that first night, about a man with nothing to lose, standing up for a stranger, about a woman with everything, discovering what she'd actually been missing, about how sometimes the simplest choices, to see someone, to help someone, to stay, changed more than you could possibly know. Zara swung between their hands. "Can we come back tomorrow?" she asked Marcus. And Sophia looked at each other. "Every day," Sophia said. "If you want to." Zara grinned. Marcus realized he wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. He wasn't calculating how long this could last. He was just living. That was new. A year after that first night at the crossroads, the Safe Workplace Initiative had trained over 500 managers, HR professionals, security officers across dozens of companies. Marcus had been promoted to Director of Organizational Culture, a position nobody had planned for, but which emerged naturally. Because his skills went far beyond de-escalation, he understood something fundamental about how to create spaces where people felt safe enough to be honest, strong enough to be vulnerable, and empowered enough to stand up. Marcus and Sophia moved in together. The two-bedroom apartment that had housed only Marcus and Zara became 3 rooms: Zara's room, their room, and a guest room where Sophia's father sometimes stayed when he came to visit. Richard had developed an unexpected respect for Marcus, the kind that comes from realizing you'd been wrong about someone in a fundamental way. Zara still had drawings on the walls, still wore dramatic shoes to school, still asked for his hand holding hers when they walked anywhere important. Marcus visited Catherine's grave on Sundays. Sometimes Sophia came with him. Sometimes he went alone. They never discussed it. It was understood that some things in a person's life belong to them alone, and that love means respecting those boundaries. Rachel Keane had started a non-profit organization supporting survivors of workplace assault. Andrea Vasquez served as legal counsel. Vivian Cross had become the organization's fiercest public advocate, channeling her considerable media expertise into awareness campaigns that reached millions. Derek Sloan's conviction had become the most powerful teaching tool in the Safe Workplace Initiative's curriculum. Not as a story of punishment, but as a story of what happens when ordinary people decide to stop looking away. The Crossroads Diner still served coffee at all hours of the night. The neon sign still flickered with tired persistence. The linoleum still cracked under the weight of thousands of footsteps. But there was something new. By the register now, a small framed sign that read, "This establishment does not tolerate harassment of any kind. We stand up for each other here." The cook, the new waitress, the owner. They all understood what the sign meant. It was a covenant, it was permission, it was a commitment that in this space you would not be alone. Marcus sometimes stopped by the Crossroads on his way home from the training center. Sophia still worked there one evening a week, not because she needed the money or the cover anymore, but because she understood something that most people never did, that the work of watching out for each other had to happen in ordinary spaces, not in boardrooms or corporate training facilities. It had to happen where people actually lived. When someone tried to grab her, tried to disrespect her, tried to treat the space as a place where their entitlement mattered more than someone else's dignity, Marcus was there, not to rescue her, to stand beside her. That was the difference. That changed everything. Marcus Blackwood never wanted to be a hero. He just refused to be a bystander. He didn't know, when he walked into the Crossroads that night, that he was walking toward his life. He thought he was just stretching a $3 coffee into a full break, trying to steal a moment of quiet before his next shift began. He didn't know that 40 seconds would shift everything. That standing up for one person would eventually mean standing with someone, that the choice to intervene in one moment would cascade into training programs and awareness campaigns and a world where fewer people looked away. He just knew that someone needed help, and he could provide it. In a world full of people choosing comfort over courage, that made all the difference. Zara grew up knowing that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She grew up knowing that families form not through blood, but through choice, through standing up, staying, showing up. She grew up knowing that her father's strength wasn't measured by his job titles or his bank account, but by his refusal to look away when it would have been easier to do so. The Silver Moon Diner still serves coffee at all hours. The neon sign still flickers, but now there's a sign that says, "We stand up for each other here." And sometimes a man who learned courage at midnight in a diner teaches others that standing up is always an option, not just an accident. If this story moved you, subscribe our channel for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when no one expects it. Because courage isn't something you're born with. It's something you choose every single day in moments that no one will ever remember until someone does.